Deltas, marshland, rivers, and flooded wetlands are essential links between aquatic and terrestrial environments. They are the Great Wetlands. Cradles of incredible biodiversity, they play a vital ecological role for the planet. An exceptional array of flora and fauna have taken refuge here. And yet, living in these wetland worlds is a constant challenge. The powerful water cycle reigns over these zones with a relentless hand. On the Bay of Fundy in Canada, tracking the rhythm of the tides makes for a fascinating journey from ocean depths to far inland regions. Here, thriving fauna and flora affront the highest tides in the world. In addition to these gigantic tides, on average 5 times higher than those on the Atlantic coast, factors in the harsh Canadian climate. In winter, blocks of ice line the beaches and mudflats. Another challenge for the wild flora and fauna that live here. But when spring arrives, the bay is once more a feeding stopover indispensable to the survival of some migrating animals. Situated on the eastern coast of Canada, near the American border, the Bay of Fundy is a sea arm, 200 kilometers long and 80 kilometers wide. Since time immemorial, the Fundy Bay is subject to a phenomenon that has no equivalent on Earth. It endures the world's highest tides, between 14 and 16 meters high. Twice a day, in only 6 hours and 13 minutes, 100 billion tons of water rush into the bay at an average speed of 40 kilometers an hour. The water thrust into this funnel multiplies the phenomenon. The oceanic wave takes on speed and is projected toward the back of the bay. The powerful waves which resonate far inland provoke a tidal bore on the Petit Kodiak River. This counter-current phenomenon is one of the strongest on the planet. Every 27 days, at each lunar revolution, the waters rise exceptionally high. In early spring, the coastal forests, affected by the cool surface waters and the ocean's humidity, are frequently wrapped in fog. At the heart of the misty forest hides Lake Bennett. With the return of good weather, a family of beavers shakes off its sleepy rhythm. It's time for these engineers to repair their construction and consolidate their dams beat up by the harsh winter. Thanks to the vast aquatic zones they maintain, the beavers and their public works promote the growth of biodiversity. They are particularly well adapted to aquatic life. Their ears and nostrils close when in contact with the water. They can hold their breath for more than 10 minutes. A fine membrane protects their eyes, and the flat hairs of their fur makes them perfectly watertight. The sun-strewn moist clearings created by the beavers make a good environment for a high herbaceous stratum that moose enjoy eating. In March, spring gently settles on Fundy Bay and the mist-covered forest. As early as April, the light becomes more present and floods the forest floor. It houses peat bogs, marshy prairies of soil made up of a deposit of decomposing vegetal matter which retains carbon. In this very acidic ecosystem, only a specific type of vegetation flourishes. Among them is the Drosera. This tiny plant makes do in soil that's very poor in nutritive elements. It's found a ruse to satisfy what's missing. It's carnivorous. Its large leaves have long tentacles with ends bearing a viscous and sticky liquid that resembles drops of dew or nectar. Once a fly, mosquito, or bee lands on it, it sticks and becomes entangled in a matter of minutes. Digestion will take a few days. In a nearby prairie, the yellow goldfinch stuffs itself with thistle leaves, a sign that spring has truly arrived. These first seeds, rich in lipids, will help her reach her goal: feed and raise her offspring, well hidden in a cozy nest deep in the forest of mist. For millions of years, the ocean has tirelessly pursued its work. With these ebbs and flows, it's cleaved the coastline of this bay, like here at Hopewell Rocks. Simple rocky islets at high tide, they transform into veritable canyons at low tide. These rocky peaks are an ideal refuge for the peregrine falcons that keep a watchful eye from afar on their most precious belonging, their progeny. This little raptor has one obsession: eating. And he makes his parents well aware of it. Just a few weeks old, he's already started to lose his downy baby hair. This young falcon was born in May on this land of legends, where the Micmac Indian tribe believed that these gigantic tides are the work of the divinities and animals that reign here. According to their tale, the beaver, obeying the god Glosscap, who wanted to take a bath, built a dam. The whale, though, refusing that the tidal currents be hindered, destroyed the dam by striking it with his fin. This gesture caused such a disturbance that the water continues its powerful ebb and flow until this day. The Bay of Fundy has remained one of the last refuges of the humpback whale, the rare right whale, and other marine animals. But now, they are threatened by the increase of maritime traffic and pollution. Moira Brown, a biologist, studies these animals and wages a daily fight to protect them.
What we saw here is just a first surfacing of some of these whales after they had been down feeding for a little while. Their first surfacing is always a little more exuberant. I guess they need a breath. Oh, they're very mellow at the surface. Must be a little bit of rest time after lunch, a siesta. Here's a fluke. That's the fingerprint that we'll be able to follow them with through the rest of their life, so. Two of those whales have really bad scarring on them from what looks like entanglement scars. Whoa, breach! Woo! To see the whole body is spectacular. The Bay of Fundy is a really prime feeding habitat for a lot of different species of large whales in the summertime. So not just North Atlantic right whales, but humpback whales, fin whales, more recently sperm whales. There is so much food in the Bay of Fundy that the result is the visibility in the water is very, very limited because the water is so full of food. Plankton, phytoplankton, zooplankton, that's what the fish are after, and then of course the whales are after the fish. So the area of the Bay of Fundy that we're just heading into right now is actually called the Graminan Basin, and it's the deepest part of the lower part of the Bay of Fundy. The right whales come here to feed, and they feed on a plankton that are called copepods. Now, this is a plankton that is very rich in lipids, so fats, and I mean, right whales grow quite large, so obviously they need to eat a lot of plankton. This is where the plankton is probably the most concentrated by virtue of a tidal gyre. Because the movement of the water here is so dynamic, you get those cold, productive waters coming up from the bottom, and it's kind of like a giant washing machine.
Its perpetual movement once again carries the water out of Fundy Bay for just a few hours. It's June, at the very beginning of summer. Inside the bay, at Mary's Point and Johnson's Mills, the outgoing tide reveals gigantic mudflats of several square kilometers. And the mud here is unique, a precise recipe of limon and sand. In summer, this biotope is a paradise for mollusks and for a tiny invertebrate that lives only here, the mud shrimp. For this little crustacean, the most difficult part of the year is about to begin. They are the staple food of many shorebirds. Greater yellowlegs, semi-palmed plovers, and other waders arrive in throngs when the weather is warm to delight in this microfauna. At the beginning of summer, hundreds of these tiny birds come from the Great North, descend on the area. They take possession of the bay to root about in the mud with their beaks and gorge themselves on crustaceans. At the mouth of the bay, on Grand Manan Island, the marine vegetation has had to adapt to the tide's strong push and pull. These rocks are the territory of the fucus, an algae firmly attached to its host thanks to a peduncle. It lives to the rhythms of the moon and the sun. Submerged every 6 hours in salty and agitated water before finding itself high and dry for 6 more hours. It's subjected to dehydration, rain, and frost. Low tide reveals what is most probably the source of the abundance of life at Fundy: simple mud puddles. Exposed to the rays of the sun, their temperature rises, making conditions optimal for the reproduction and growth of plants, crustaceans, and mollusks. These puddles are a refuge and a nursery for larvae and alevins. These microorganisms are an essential element in marine life. They are part of the plankton indispensable to the diet of many corals, anemones, nudibranches, and ascidians. Benefiting from the ideal conditions in the bay, krill larvae have proliferated. Despite their small size, these shrimp are essential to the survival of the giants that gather here. Early July, attracted by the great quantities of krill, humpbacked whales and their calves take part in this rendezvous. They've traveled 3,000 kilometers from the Caribbean to enjoy this bounty. They can weigh more than 30 tons and measure 18 meters long. In order to offer nourishing milk to their young, they must devour 2 tons of plankton and krill every day. During the summer, the Bay of Fundy offers room and board to more than 300 whales. Other migrating species take advantage of the riches in these currents. After several months spent at high sea, this little clownbird comes here every year to set foot on solid ground. These colonies, of several dozen Atlantic puffins, settled on Machias Seal Island, at the entrance to the bay. They have come to enjoy the plentiful food, find a companion, and reproduce. And for both ventures, their parrot beak plays an important role. It allows them to transport up to 30 fish and acts as an element of seduction. Males with the most colorful beaks have a better chance of reproducing. During courtship, they rub beaks to seduce the one with whom they'll faithfully spend the next few months. The puffin sets up its den in the grassy slopes or under rocks. The parents relay one another for 6 weeks fishing to nourish their sole offspring. A neighboring islet serves as a repository for colonies of gray seals. They patiently await the next high tide, the most auspicious moment for a profitable catch. If some of them prefer to doze in the sunshine, others float on their back, so they'll only have to glide with the water when the tide goes out. These seals live in harmony with the rhythms of the tides and derive a whopping benefit from Fundy Bay's incoming streams. These fish-filled waters promise facile feasting for these animals, capable of ingurgitating more than 4 kilos of fish a day. Summer extends peaceably on the beaches, lakes, and mudflats. The temperatures regularly hit 40 degrees Celsius. The moon announces a new tide cycle and the appearance of an outsized predator. The great white shark. This super predator appreciates the shallow waters of Fundy Bay. This place has everything it likes most: murky waters and his favorite prey, the seal. At night, the silhouette of the great white haunts Fundy Bay. At midsummer, aerial ballets erupt over the horizon. Semi-palm plovers arrive by the thousands from the Arctic. They take possession of Fundy in great numbers for a stopover of just a few weeks. For them, this is a high-stakes phase. They're here to ingurgitate a maximal amount of food and gather strength to continue their migration to South America. At high tide, when the mudflats are covered, the plovers take naps and clean themselves. It's a life-saving rest for these shorebirds who mustn't draw on the energy reserves they're trying to reconstitute. The slightest gram of weight lost before the big departure for their winter home is precious. At low tide, like a small army, they gather in tight formation on the mud to devour mud shrimp. These gatherings of several thousands of individuals allow them to optimize the detection of predators. Once again, the Bay of Fundy plays a determinant role in the survival of a species. 75% of the world's population of semi-palmed plovers stop here in summer and are highly dependent on its mud shrimp resources. Diana Hamilton, biology professor at the University of Mount Allison, studies the birds to better understand the mechanism and protect the bay.
And the current study that we're doing involves primarily looking at movements of birds in the bay. So a bird tagged here, for example, will it move around the whole Bay of Fundy or will it just stay in this area? How long will it stay? And what will it eat? Sandpipers, like a lot of migratory shorebirds, carry out their life in a wide range of very diverse habitats. They breed in the Arctic, northern Canada and the United States and Alaska as well. They winter in South America, and they, of course, in getting from one point to the other, need fuel. So they really are fueling stations, and the Bay of Fundy here is one of the most important fueling stations for semi-palmated sandpipers. Once we successfully catch them, we remove the birds from the net as quickly as possible and place them into boxes. Then we proceed to process them. And depending upon exactly when we're doing it, there are several different things we like to do in the earlier pulls, like what we're trying to do here now. So this is the receiver. We have to just turn on the tags before we deploy them, obviously, or they won't work. So this receiver is then logging the tag ID. So here's the transmitter. What we did is we clipped an area of the lower back feathers and then glued the transmitter onto the back. It weighs 1/3 of a gram, so it's extremely light. We also put little white leg flags on them. They're field readable, so people, for example, can see our birds, take pictures of them, send them to us, and they tell us, oh, we saw your bird at such and such a site at such and such a time. One of the things that we do is collect blood samples from the birds and look at stable isotopes in the blood. So these are isotopes of carbon and nitrogen that, when compared with signatures of the prey, allow us to guess what they're eating. Here, guys. It offers a really rich food supply for these birds. Because of the nature of the Bay of Fundy and the fact that the tides are so extreme, at low tide, many hectares of mudflat are exposed. And what this does is it allows the birds to feed freely on the invertebrates that live in the mud. So it's just a great feeding area for them.
The falcon has chosen a strategic position near his nest to best attack the colonies of plovers. After a brief moment of panic, the flock of birds regains its defensive posture. It immediately forms a compact mass that allows each bird to blend into the group. This strategy dilutes risk. For the most part, the falcon will catch the weakest among them. He dives, hitting them full force at 110 kilometers an hour. This game of high-speed bumper cars guarantees success. The peregrine falcon is said to be the fastest bird in the world when it dives. Almost an adult, the young falcon will soon need to eat 2 or 3 small birds or rodents per day. Its feathers are almost perfect. It's lost its down and should soon be ready for its first flight. The tide is at its apex. The summer season attracts one of the largest concentrations of lobsters on the planet to these coasts. The American lobster is the biggest of them all. It can reach 1 meter in length and weigh 20 kilos. Solitary and territorial, it will not brook intruders. This den protects its owner from turbulence and light. He has no intention of surrendering it. the end of summer approaches for Canada and the Bay of Fundy. The last rays of sunlight pierce the thin veil that envelops the forest of mist. Moose are great devotees of the wetland zones. They enjoy immersing themselves for hours on end to cool off and feed on the aquatic plants. A veritable delicacy to the cervidae, this young male fills himself with water lily leaves. He can ingest more than 20 kilos per day. Time is short. He must make the most of it before winter comes. The common loon also takes advantage of the last gifts of summer on Lake Bennett. He's a regular on these coastal zones and wetlands, often at the mercy of the tides. Soon he'll take flight for the southern region of North America. For his part, the moose will penetrate deep into the misty forest. The first rain showers announce the coming of autumn. On the cliffs of Hopewell Rocks, the falcons have stopped feeding their young for several days now. The goal of these parents is simple: motivate him to fly so they can begin his apprenticeship and teach him to hunt. For migrating species, the end of summer signals their departure. Semi-palm plovers progressively take their leave. Before regaining their winter quarters, these aerial acrobats will make a journey of 4,000 kilometers. Their airborne marathon towards Suriname and French Guiana will be non-stop. It will take 72 hours. In the absence of these small yet voracious predators, Fundy's stock of mud shrimp will be able to reestablish itself. Whales will also take the southern route toward warmer waters rich with sustenance. Under the watchful eyes of his parents, the young falcon finally takes flight for the first time. The Bay of Fundy is a unique source of food provisions for marine mammals and shorebirds. It's one of the principal restorative migratory halts. For the sedentary animals of the Fundy wetlands, it's time to prepare for the harsh rigors of the Canadian climate. The waters of Lake Bennett are starting to freeze. The beavers gobble the last water lilies before gathering provisions. During the autumn months, they'll work non-stop to pile up the branches whose bark they'll eat throughout the winter. The Bay of Fundy's powerful ebb and flow sweeps a quantity of water equivalent to all the Earth's rivers united. In December, the ice and snow invite themselves to Fundy Bay. Negative temperatures, which fall between 15 and 20 below, manage to freeze the seawater. Broken off by the to and fro of the tides, ice rafts will flow with the currents and smash against the rocks deserted by the seal colonies. Mollusks and crustaceans have burrowed deep into the soil to flee this chaos and live in slow motion. On the beaches where the mud shrimp live, the water crystallizes in contact with the frozen earth. After taking a beating from the sun, the algae attached to the rocks must endure the cold and the berkeys of ice that smash against them like bulldozers. Fucus is damaged by the ice, but algae are extremely resistant. At low tide, the mud, so rich in summer, freezes. It's now trapped under a thick layer of ice. To endure the biting cold, trees and carnivorous plants have gone dormant. The mudflats are engulfed in several centimeters of snow. Most of the animals have migrated. On the Beavers' frozen lake, there's not a living soul. In the forest of mist, only squirrels and the curious blue jays have come out. The latter have managed to hide a wealth of provisions. If only they can remember all their hiding places. This practice encourages the germination of seeds and tree nuts, and thus benefits the forest. Due to a lack of accessible aquatic plants, the moose have discreetly withdrawn into the forest. Perfectly adapted to harsh climates, they are now clad in a dense and insulating fur. The moose makes do with tree bark, much less nutritional than water lilies, but sufficient to make it through the winter. The deer also leave for the bad season to settle in the depths of the Canadian wild forest. They'll find what they need to survive there. Bark and plant buds will be their daily fare for the coming months. In spring, they'll return and enjoy the riches of the bay once more. Every day, the Bay of Fundy churns 160 billion cubic meters of water. These tides are not only one of the most stunning spectacles in nature, they further the development of numerous marine and land ecosystems. They are the daily guarantee of the well-being of an incomparable fauna.